Welcome to the Rebel Alliance Briefing Room podcast. We are here to podcast about anything and everything Star Wars with you. Please visit our website where you can play current and past episodes. That's https://RABR KyleJohansson.us. That's RABR dot KAILEJOHANSEN dot US. On the left-hand side is a navigation menu. You can use this to learn how to load the Rebel Alliance Briefing Room podcast on your Android or Apple phone and tablet. And we have direct links to our podcast on Apple and Google Podcasts. Please participate by connecting to our social media, answering questions of the week, or submitting feedback directly from the site. Again, all of these are available at the Rebel Alliance Briefing Room website at RABR.KAILEJOHANSEN.US. And now, it's time to talk Star Wars. I am Kyle John Johansson, and this is Andrew Scott Sutton. Say hello.
Hello. Today again, Scott's not going to be with us. He's pulling a lot of extra hours at work, and all those hours you need more sleep. So he's either working or sleeping right now, and he sent us some feedback of his own on this episode, and we'll read it later on. But today we're going to go through the episode ourselves, and that's that. Let's do this.
Spoiler alert.
Danger. That's right. So we're going to be talking about the current episode. That would be Star Wars Andor Episode 6. The Eye is what it's called. And I don't know if you guys realized when you watched it or remember when we talked about it in a news article in the past that the effects that happen during the Eye is basically there's a moon or something that's crossing the path of the planet, and it has rings with debris in the rings, and so the gases and the debris in the rings cause this effect to happen once a year. And they, have this temple that they celebrate it and everything like that. So anyway, that's the event that's happening, locally. But today is a pretty exciting episode. Today, episode, um, from what Scott said on his feedback, he enjoyed it quite a bit because it was more back to the Star Wars that he was looking for. So, being that said, we're going to get into just a news article.
It's time for the news.
All right. So, you guys remember, I think it was in the previous episode, not necessarily this one, the Arvel Skeen guy, the big guy, had a couple tattoos that Andor talked about. And they were brief and very little descriptions given, but, we got the idea that Andor recognized what they were and possibly had run-ins with or been a part of some of those groups. So he had a tattoo on his chest that had like a C, and it was called the Crate Head tattoo. And that tattoo is an important relic of Tusken Raiders. The whenever they conquer one of those crate dragons, they always display it, and you remember seeing it in the Boba Fett show where they had the crate dragon on top of one of their sand crawlers. And the crate dragon is one of the most dangerous animals on Tatooine, and the barcode could identify Skeen as one of the thousands of prisoners or slaves likely on Tatooine, referenced by the BioWare game that was part of the expanded universe, Knights of the Old Republic. Um, and they just kind of brought that into canon now. That the slaves and prisoners are tattooed with a crate dragon tattoo. So that means our guy's been in prison or was forced to work, either or, probably the same. And the one on his arm, to me, it looks like a body or something, but no, it was called the by the hand, um, and that tattoo by the hand is connected to the hand of Thrawn. It's also connected to Palpatine. Palpatine had a group of what he called right hand people, and they referred to themselves as by the hand of Palpatine. And they would do stuff. He would call upon them at any time to do stuff for him. Usually wasn't very pleasant stuff. But when Palpatine is supposedly killed at the end of Return of the Jedi, Admiral Thrawn takes it over, and it's called by the hand of Thrawn. Um, and they basically were had all kinds of threats throughout the Empire. Um, they built a lot of cages, which implied fishy things. Um, and again, the group was heavily featured in the several of the series of books written by Timothy Zahn around Vice Admiral Thrawn. And they were used to fight off threats and stuff, and it wasn't necessarily threats that were good for the people per se. It was more of threats to um, what the empire used to be or what it was, or maybe the empire that was trying to be built. Because we know that the First Order eventually comes out of um, you know with Kylo Ren and all that stuff comes out um, several years later, about 30 years later. So that is basically the only news article we got. Hope that helps.
The news.
Close that. All right, so that'll get us into the episode discussion here, which means more spoilers. So if you guys aren't into spoilers, don't know why you're listening to our podcast, because we will spoil the latest episode for you every time. That's right. So our episode starts off on Aldani. Cassian is talking with Nimic, and he's anxious about the mission. He can't sleep. He's having troubles, and he's worried that if he can't sleep, he's not going to be um, up to the task and everything. And you know, that's where Andor kind of tells him, hey, when the time comes, you won't need to worry about sleep. It'll just kick in. And they talk about it, and Mimic talks, of course, more about his idealism and his manifesto and all that stuff, and such. I believe he says something about that he wrote about Clem in his manifesto. Not necessarily Clem himself, but what Clem seems to represent, and how mercenaries are a necessary part of either side. And then we see we're still on the planet. We see the Imperial Commandant J-Hole Bahiz, and he's briefing officers. He's the guy in charge of the base that we're gonna attack here later. and he's talking about how he's manipulated the Hani people to giving by giving them false choices. He talks about how he how they set up shops and beer halls, giving out cheap beer and cheap foods and restaurants and stuff along the way that would distract the Dahani from their trek to the Eye every year. So they can kind of wean them off of coming out and forget about the. Sorry about that, guys. Guess I had a little coughing fit. I had to pause here for a little bit. Hopefully, I got most of that out. So anyway, they were talking about how they were manipulating the Dahani into less and less people coming to observe the Eye in that specific area in that valley. Because the Empire wants to expand their base, and that basically means they're going to have to tear down that temple that they use with the fire and all that stuff and everything to expand out further. Um, like I said, they've discouraged them. They offered them trips or free travel to the temple and everything, and they turned all that down. Um, and Lieutenant Gorn is there. He reports that it used to be a number of close to 15,000 every year, and now it's down to 60 people arriving. And that's when the Colonel Pedigar says that the Dahani this will be the last year they permitted to travel to the valley. Commandant responds, that if he cares about the people or whatever, and he says there's no profit in that. When they point out again that the valley is sacred, he talks about recruiting the Dahani for the Imperial Army. And Pedigar asks Gorn if the locals will be able to use the valley at all, and Gorn says, "Well, they really won't have a choice, will they?" And they sit there observing the festivities, the people coming up, all the goings on. And then we see a little scene between Gorn and Behaz where he's talking about how it's a great effort for him to entertain the engineer. And Gorn tells Pedigar about the sentries that he has to help make sure everything's peaceful. And then we go back and we see Timuron attempting to contact Val on a radio, and he says Echo 1, Echo 1, Echo 1 quite a bit, and they call it a battle radio. And they said that Nimic tempered with the radio, allowing it to work even after they disable the radio at the Empire base. This will still work. So it's an older tech. It's not an Empire. It used to be Empire tech, but it's been unempired, let's say. And while they're walking, Skeen tells Andor that Tamarin used to be a former stormtrooper. And that's why he's kind of, marching all this order and stuff like that, and wanting to keep everybody in line. And we see like one or two of these comets come through the atmosphere while we're going through here. Up in the sky, and everybody's obviously amazed by it and stuff still. Um, and signaling the start of the ritual every year. Uh, and they arrive. Um, Andor in the team all line up on the route, so that they can be assimilated into um, the the regular troops that are supposed to be there. Um, he orders Lieutenant Gorn orders the garrison to welcome the pilgrims after reaching the base. Tells them that just to shut up and keep their eyes open and make sure that there's no horseplay or anything going on, but not to disturb the Dahani. Um, and he asks uh, Andor and his rebels to at the top of the path at the temple to wait there for um, the commandant to return back to the base. And the commandant we see is in his quarters getting dressed, and he is having trouble with his belt sash thing on his outfit. And he tells his wife that it might have been compressed too much. They probably had it in some sort of you know uh, air compressed bag or whatever like that for storage. And he says it's compressed too much; it doesn't fit anymore. And his wife quips that it might just be that he has expanded um, instead. And he tells his son that his son needs to wear the Imperial tunic because they're going to be part of an Imperial ceremony, and he needs to dress the part. Uh, we see the leader of the pilgrims addresses Gorn, and we see Gorn assigns several um, to stay again, and we see Val and Cinta have their diving gear on, and they're waiting for um, a moment when they can get in the water and run through the river to the base. Um, and then we see what they call receiving of the goat skins, the skins. Um, and they pass off the skins. He says the hides smell of the goat quite strongly. Um, and we see some scenes of Val and Cintas getting into the base. They set a disruptor on the tower that has the communications come in on, and they wait for a while. We see the passing of the hides between the colonel and or the commandant and the leader of the thing. They pass the goats, and uh, that's when Tamarin makes contact with Val and Cinta to see if they're a go on the mission. And there's a little tension there, and eventually she responds that they're a go. I think she's just afraid. She's scared of everything that's going to happen, and this is her last chance to call it off, and she's just kind of really wants to call it off because she's afraid everybody's going to fail. But they go ahead and go. Um, and we see lots more comments and everything coming through the sky. Um, and we see the goat skin gets thrown into the fire and is burnt. Um, Gorn asks Tamarin, while they're waiting, if they're good to go, and Tamarin says they're here to serve you, and they follow um, the commandant and his family into the base. And once inside, they seal the entrance, and the rebels immediately ambush Commandant Behes and his family, forcing them down to the ground, including all the guards. Uh, Colonel Pedagar points a gun at Nemec and demands that he release the boy, which is the commandant's son. And Andor tries to calm the situation down, but Sintis and Val drop into uh, the area they're at, and Sintis shoots Pedagar's gun out of his hand before he can get off a shot. Um, Gorn tells the soldiers that everything's okay. They might have heard a noise or something, and that his men can rest for the night. The pilgrims light a fire and mark the celebration, and there's dancing and singing going on. Val demands the commandant unlock the vault, but he claims he doesn't know how or doesn't have the power to do that. And Sintis and Val place hoods on his wife and son and tell him to cooperate and uh, and he allows them to enter. They get into the vault area and disarm all the guards and technicians and such, and they disable the communications except for one for the Alkinzi base, which would have thrown a red flag, and they would have launched TIE fighters immediately. The Imperials are all gagged up, so they can't talk. In the command room, Valen tells him to cooperate or kill his family. She promises to spare them if they cooperate, which is kind of foreign to the Imperials because they would have just killed everybody in the end anyway, and that's what they think is going to happen anyway. And then we see a scene where Officer Kamenzi, who is in the communications tower on top of the dam, notices they're down. Um, Another soldier believes the eye is interfering with communications. And Tamarin and the rebels proceed deeper into the base with Behes as captive, of course. Behes convinces all the personnel to lay down their arms and cooperate with the rebels in order to prevent bloodshed. Skeen orders several Imperial soldiers to list in loading the payroll register while Behes unlocks the vault. Behes does not have full access, but he opens up the vault door with his hand scan, and they blow the locking mechanisms on the whatever's holding those credits. And you can see in there the credits. The room there's like thousands of those big things, and we find out later on in the episode that they end up stealing about 80 million credits, and I wonder if the 80 is each one of those things is a million credits. One of those big bar things is a million credits, so we can assume that that room held hundreds of millions of credits from the forces. And they begin loading and loading, and people are following, and all of a sudden some forces come down. Probably Kamenzi and those guys were alerted, and he comes down to check because he overhears calm chatter between our rebels and his comrades up in the control room where the communications and stuff are. They get it all, start to load it up on this freighter. Sintus dons an Imperial officer uniform while the intercom receives transmission about a breach in the vault. Sintus switches off the transmitter and the lights. Outside, the pilgrims sing and worship in Dahani. Worshippers lift a dome over a pyre while watching comets fly through the sky. Suspicious about the base lights and transmitter shutting down, Kamenzi and several Imperial soldiers go down a flight of stairs toward the vault. And then we see he's notices that Gorn has come down also, and he is working with the rebels, and calls Gorn a traitor, and Gorn replies that for working 7 years for him, he deserves worse than being called a traitor, and to be hanged for it. We see the TIE fighter pilots getting into their TIE fighters. Takes a while to load those and get them going and get them hooked up and get them running, so they've got some more time. And we see Kamenzi and his men come down into the vault through the same back way that Gorn came through, and they begin shooting, and Kamenzi gets shot. Several other people get shot. Gun battle breaks, and there's lots of pew 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 as they continue to load. Many of the soldiers get shot, and our team gets pinned down pretty good. We see a soldier is shot by Nimic. Tamara attempts to reach out to Vel, but is killed with a blaster bolt on the way. Once Nimic and Skeen have boarded the freighter, Andor flies the freighter through the launch tunnel, which that's a pretty interesting tunnel. I guess we're underground, so we've got to get back out and up into the air. And during the ascent, when Andor, hits the engines hard, most of the crew is thrown back, and Nimic is thrown back between some of the carrying devices that they had the credits on, and one of the other engine thrusts throw him against and in between those two things, and he gets crushed a little bit. You can visibly hear and see that. I mean, he's hit pretty hard. Probably breaking his back. He complains that he can't feel his legs anymore. Skeen and Val manage to free him, but his leg is crushed. And Val gives him a med spike, which probably gets rid of most of the pain, and probably does some other healing properties, but it can't do much about his crushed legs and everything. And Andor keeps asking for the coordinates. He doesn't really realize what's going on with Nimic. I mean, he has an idea, but he's not quite 100% sure what's going on. And he's like, "What did you give this guy?" And Nimic starts telling him to pull up and dive and so on and so on. And he asks basically to get through the comet trails and such. And he finally gives him a vector coordinates of 65551, and we see the TIE fighters following them, attempting to keep up, and they're firing pew pew pew. They're firing at him, and of course these are stormtroopers. Even though the troopers that are in TIE fighters are elite troopers, because they wouldn't be able to fly TIE fighters. They still miss the ship quite a bit. There's a couple times when it gets hit, and almost all or every single one of the TIE fighters is destroyed by debris from the rings and everything entering the atmosphere. We see five on the ground. We see Cintas disguised exiting the base and walking past the pilgrims, who are all mesmerized by the display up in the sky. We get a few seconds of looking at that, and we obviously see all kinds of colors. It looks almost like the Matrix, but in color. Just streaming across the sky. It's an amazing sight, and I'm sure it would be if it was something real or whatever. That's be something to see. And we could see why a society might worship something like that, because that's a pretty awesome kind of sight. Val asks Andor asks where they're headed, and Val asks about Nemik's well-being, and promoting Skeen to ask if she is disappointed. And Andor asks again, where are we headed? And Val is not quite sure because Nemik is dying, and she thinks that he needs to go to a doctor. And Skeen, she doesn't think it's worth it. She thinks it's the mission is he's going to die no matter what. So we might as well continue on with the mission and so on. And Skeen tells Andor that they need to go to this doctor. He was built into the contingency plan, in case they needed to. They go to this doctor to get Nemik all patched up. Later, we see Quapa performing surgery, giving shots and performing surgery on Nemik. He's a four-armed humanoid doctor who wears goggles on his eyes. We see him operating on Nemik's back outside the hut. Skeen and Andor wait. And this is where we get the part where Skeen basically is going to backstab everybody and try to escape with all the money. Not Val or Nemik or anybody. It's just going to be him and Andor, and he wants to split it halfway, 50-50. 40 million credits apiece, because they estimate they've got about 80 million credits on the freighter. And they're wanting to find a place to take the profits and hide out for a while once things cool down and stuff. And Skeen basically says that all he is he's not really a rebel. He's just after fortune. And when Andor questions him about his brother, Skeen reveals that he made up the story. He doesn't really have a brother. He just used the story to convince Andor that everything was okay. And Skeen wants to hide the payroll on a moon 8 parsecs away. And Andor is so disgusted and probably realizes that eventually he's going to end up dead anyway if he follows Skeen, so he shoots and kills him with his blaster. And we see Andor walking into the hut with his gun drawn, and the doctor's pulling the blanket over Nemik, because Nemik has died. He was injured pretty badly, and the doctor wasn't able to save him. And we see Andor tells Val that Skeen is dead, because she's wondering where he's at. He wants to buy the doctor's ship for 30,000 credits and get his cut and get out of there by himself. Um, and Andor reveals, of course, that Skeen is dead. And Skeen's plot to double swap them all. And describes him as a disgusting bastard. Andor demands his share of the money, but offers to leave the freighter and the stolen payroll. He says that he is done, and also returns the signet the necklace he had that was had a sky kyber crystal on it. He returns that to Val and says, "Return this to your friends." And we see Val wants to give Andor Nemik's manifesto, and Andor kind of says, "No, I don't really want that. I don't have any need for that." And Val says that Nemik insisted, so she goes ahead and hands it to him, and he walks out the the hut. We see nothing else, and then we get back to Coruscant, and we see uh, ISB central office, and everybody's rushing because the major has called an emergency meeting, um, including our Lieutenant Deidre Miro. He says that he wants every star sector and planetary emergency retaliation plan in the building ready for presentation by midnight. At the Imperial Senate, Senator Mon Mothma urges a fact-finding committee to into the blockade at Gorman, and she's ignored because people are noticing, uh, the news coming in about this rebel attack on a Imperial base, and money being stolen and such. So people are leaving and ignoring, and they're looking at the story, and she eventually notices and picks up a tablet and reads for herself that something's happened, and she's doesn't really show that much emotion there, but you can kind of tell that she's happy that the mission was a success. Um, and then we switch to the antique shop where Luthen is at, and they're serving a customer that's looking at some necklaces and stuff, and he mentions that there's an inscription on the back of the necklace, and they don't know what the language is, so she can make up whatever is on that inscription. And there's a guy there that asks about antiques at Aldani, because he's looking at the news himself. He's like, "Oh, because of wouldn't that be cool if you had something because of the recent events?" And Luthen says that he might have something in the back. He doesn't know for sure. He's going to go look, and he goes to the back of the office and begins to calm down and starts laughing with joy at the victory of the rebel attack. And that's when the credits roll not long after that. So, what do you think about that episode? That was a pretty action packed, I think. There's a lot going on there, a lot happening. As Scott said, it's kind of it had everything: action, suspense, drama, and comedy. So let's play this here while I take a second.
We are proud to welcome our latest sponsor, Juan's Cantina, where every first week of the month on the Standard Galactic calendar we celebrate what the ancients call Cinco de Mayo. Come join us at Juan's for the food, mariachi music, and 34 flavors of margaritas. That's Juan's Cantina right next to the Hangar 94 of Mos Eisley Spaceport. On day 2 of the week is Taco Tuesday. All tacos are half a credit each and enjoyed with our house margaritas. Juan's Cantina also serves the galactically famous Dos Camarones Azul Cerveza, imported directly from Kessel. Thank you again for our latest sponsor, Juan's Cantina.
That's right, Juan's Cantina. Mexican food is always good. even in the galaxy far, far away. All right, so I did a question of the week. Doesn't necessarily match up with what Scott mentioned as his question of the week. Um, his question was related to is this? Do we think this is one of the first times a a big successful rebel attack has happened? Um, and I think in Andor's circle, maybe it is. There's probably other things going on. I mean, we have to realize that we're at least 5 years after Order 66. So there's got to be some uprising going on in other places, other planets, and we know on Ryaloth there's an uprising going on there. There's several areas of rebellion throughout the galaxy as it is. My question of the week is um, does Andor have a conscience? Basically, is this the last time we see Val, or does he go back and um, get Val and reunite with them? Or is that, like I said, the last time we see Val and the crew? We'd like to hear your thoughts and opinions about all that. Um, we have our feedback.
Feedback at KyleJohansson.us. That's feedback, KyleJohansson.us.
You can definitely send it to that email. That's what Scott did for his um, notes that he wanted to send to be read in. You can go send it to that email, feedback at KyleJohansson.us. We have 3 or 4 other ways you can also send it in. We have a link on the left-hand side of the website that says feedback, of course, and you get a form there you can fill out. We ask what your name is so we can identify and tell who is asking what, and then a spot to put in as much feedback as you want about the episode or anything we've said on the podcast. You can do that, submit it. It comes to us through Google Forms. We don't collect any IPs or anything like that through this form. It's totally anonymous. Go ahead and do that. And also, we have on the left hand side again, we have questions of the week, which, our question this week again is does Andor go back for Val? And when you answer that question, submit what your vote is. Down below, there's a spot for comments to kind of explain why you answered what you answered, or any more anything else you want to say about the question itself or the what it implies. And also, of course, eventually we'll get this up on YouTube. And on YouTube, there is comments under each video that you can fill out for us to. Any of those areas you comment in will be read onto the podcast next time. Which let's just get into some of those locations. You can go. Of course, we are on social media. We're on Twitter mostly, and you can go there. We have feedback.rabr.kylejohansson.us, social, and so on. And you'll see all those on our website. Let's get into Scott's feedback. He says, "Now this episode is worthy of the Star Wars franchise. It had everything: action, suspense, drama, and comedy." And he's laughing emojis, crying emojis. The doctor scene was probably one of my favorites this week because it back, uh, flashed to Book of Boba Fett, and I'm not sure exactly what he means by that, except for we saw the doctor scenes in Boba Fett where they were doing mods and stuff like that. Replacing whatever in Shan and such. And then of course the last scene in the back room of the antique shop where the where Luthen laughs and says it started. He really enjoyed the entire episode. He thought it was he was getting pretty bored of the last few episodes, and they were kind of these all should have been done together. They shouldn't have been broken apart. But that's just my opinion. So yeah, we want you to send us your feedback um, on any part of this episode. You know, if we missed something, if I went through it too fast, if you don't like it when Scott doesn't show up because he's funny, send us the feedback. If you don't agree, if you do agree, we want any type of feedback you've got. You know, am I too loud? Is the music or the fake commercials too much for you? Just let us all know everything. And that wraps that up. So that's basically our entire show. Um, sorry this one is so short. Hopefully I can get all these pieces together. When I had a coughing fit earlier. Um, we do appreciate you, and we'd like you to um, visit us as much as possible. And of course, we're looking forward to your feedback.
Thank you for listening to the Rebel Alliance Briefing Room podcast. Please visit our website where you can play current and past episodes. That's https://RABR KyleJohansson.us. That's RABR KyleJohansson.us. On the left-hand side is a navigation menu. You can use this to learn how to load the Rebel Alliance Briefing Room podcast on your Android or Apple phone and tablet. And we have direct links to our podcast on Apple and Google Podcasts. Please participate by connecting to our social media, answering questions of the week, or submitting feedback directly from the site. Again, all of these are available at the Rebel Alliance Briefing Room website at RABR.KyleJohansson.us. This podcast in no way is approved, sponsored, or owned by Lucasfilms Ltd., Disney, Disney Plus, or any of its subsidiaries. All opinions are solely owned by Kyle and or Scott, and in no way express the views or opinions of their past or present employers. Views and opinions are not supported or restricted by Lucasfilms Ltd., Disney, Disney Plus, or any of its subsidiaries. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of this podcast and its affiliate sites without consent of Super Duper Podcast Network and its host is prohibited. I am Kyle Johansson, and this is Andrew Scott Sutton. Say goodbye now.
Bye. Again, Scott will be back as soon as his work situation calms down. You know, he's working extra hours and all that stuff, and that means that he needs more time to sleep and to make up for the hours that he's working. So hopefully he'll be back. Have a good week.